After being reborn, the first thing I did was go to the hospital to abort the child in my belly. Then I filed for divorce from Jack. I didn't fight for custody of our son Leo, nor did I want any other assets. All I asked for was a sea view house in a small seaside town. I made the small 3-bedroom apartment very cozy, buying all child-friendly furniture and items. Leo initially thought that all this was meant for him and showed disdain. It wasn't until he found the pink children's room filled with dolls and the closet full of beautiful princess dresses that he started to feel alarmed. Both he and Jack thought I was ill, that I had gone mad. He cried and questioned me. "Mom, I am your biological son. Why don't you even look at me, but treat this imaginary daughter of yours so well?" What he didn't know was that she wasn't an illusion. I really had a beautiful and well-behaved daughter. She lives in my memories of my past life. 6 months after settling in the small seaside town, Jack called me and asked why. Our divorce was very uneventful, as simple as having a meal together. We both assumed Leo would stay with Jack, and there was no contention over custody. He never asked why I suddenly wanted a divorce and completed the paperwork with a cold demeanor. I thought he didn't care, just as he never cared about my happiness or sadness throughout our marriage. But now, 6 months later, he suddenly asked me why. At that moment, I was hanging a portrait in the freshly painted pink children's room. The portrait of a woman holding a little girl sitting by the window, with the blue sea and rows of windmills outside the window, and the golden sunlight covering the little girl's face, hiding her sickly pallor. I stared at the little girl's face in the painting, lost in thought. Why? I wanted to say, because we were supposed to have a daughter. Her name was Lisa. She was beautiful and sweet, but unfortunately not healthy. While 70% of congenital heart diseases can be detected during prenatal checkups, she was in the unlucky 30%. You showed her some brief fatherly love, but quickly lost patience due to her frequent hospitalizations and surgeries. You began staying out all night, using the bad atmosphere at home as an excuse. While I was exhausted from taking care of her, praying outside the ICU that death wouldn't take her away, and signing the forms to give up treatment, watching doctors remove her oxygen tube, you were outside cheating with your mistress, bringing Leo along so he could happily call another woman mom. But I didn't say anything in the end, just asked Jack, "Did you have breakfast with Jane today?" A year after settling in the seaside town, I saw Leo. At that time, I had just returned from a trip to the Middle East, carrying a canvas bag and walking home, only to see 2 figures standing in front of the hallway. I instinctively stopped to keep my distance from them. As time passed, I seldom thought about the father and son duo anymore. They didn't like me, and my feelings for them were worn thin through the long-lasting disappointments of my previous life. I thought that as long as I didn't seek them out, we would never meet again in this life. Leo was the first to speak. Even though he was only 6, he was precocious and spoke in a childish voice that still hurt. The school organized a family trip here, and my grandparents said since we're here, we should see you. It's a matter of courtesy and etiquette for Jack's family. I silently nodded. He and Jack looked very much alike, not just their refined features, but even the cold, indifferent way they looked at me was identical. In my previous life, when I was broken at Lisa's funeral, when I climbed the 36th floor rooftop in my previous life, their father and son would look at me with the same cold, indifferent eyes. Jack said, "Sonny, don't be ridiculous." Leo would say, "Mom, don't be ridiculous." Actually, 1 month after the divorce, Leo had contacted me. He had somehow learned that I had moved to this seaside town, and specially made a call to tell me disdainfully. "They said you moved to the seaside and specially decorated a children's room and replaced all the housewares with child-friendly sets. But I won't live with you, so don't bother." I calmly replied with a HM, and then heard him cheer on the other end. "Wow, Jane got me a new gaming console. Jane is the best." He then quickly hung up. Obviously, my departure had no impact on his life. He preferred the games and also liked Jane, who always bought him games, more than he liked me, his biological mother. But now, the indifference on his face suddenly broke. His eyes, which looked just like Jack's, filled with tears in an instant. He gritted his teeth and stubbornly stared at me. This time, it was my turn to meet his gaze with indifference. In the end, he couldn't hold on and tried to run away before his tears fell, but tripped and fell to the ground with a thud. He lay there for a while, not getting up, just turning back to look at me. He had always been like this. When I tried to be close to him, he would always put on an impatient face and reject me coldly in every possible way. The moment my attention shifted away from him, he would deliberately fall or pretend to be unwell, making me soften my heart and leaving me helpless. But this time, I just looked at him coldly, unmoved. He widened his eyes in disbelief, his face showing a mix of confusion, misunderstanding, and sadness, and started crying loudly in front of me. "You're a liar, a big liar. You said you'd love me forever, be with me forever." Jack frowned and scolded me. "Sonny, even though he's young, he understands everything. You shouldn't treat him this coldly." His expression was solemn, his attitude as superior as ever. The relationship between us had always been like that, not like husband and wife, but more like employee and boss. Most of the time, when he was home, he wouldn't speak to me unless I initiated the conversation, reporting the trivial details of daily life to him. He was always indifferent about matters related to me, only interfering when it came to Leo, even scolding me sternly in front of Leo and the maids without sparing my feelings. Because of this, whenever he showed displeasure, I couldn't help but reflect, self-criticize, and think repeatedly about what I had done wrong, what needed improvement. Now, seeing that same face, I only felt immense dislike. "Do you remember what you said to me during our divorce?" He had said that he hoped I wouldn't disturb Leo's life anymore, that Leo was still young and would quickly get used to not having me as his mother, and it would be best for him this way. That was the longest he had ever spoken to me throughout the whole divorce process. Now he said again self-righteously, "It was naive of me back then. Leo is your only child. Mother and son are connected by heart. He needs you and you." I interrupted, "But I don't need him." Jack stood there a bit stunned. Neither he nor Leo had ever seen me this serious. He still doesn't seem to understand the determination I had when I left a year ago. Like he'll never understand, Leo isn't my only child. I once had a daughter, though only I knew that. On the day I was reborn, I dreamt of Lisa crying. She called me a liar. She said, "Mom, you promised me that after I left, you'd live well." Her tears broke my heart. I promised her I would, that this time, Mom would keep her word. But I can only fulfill one promise, to her or to Leo. My love for Leo was never less than my love for Lisa. He was the child I bore through life-threatening circumstances, my flesh and blood. I had eagerly awaited his arrival. Even when he was too young to speak, his sweet smiles could make me forget the hardships and pains of being Mrs. Gu. Back then, I was willing to give him everything, even my life, as long as he could grow up happy and healthy. Jack never loved me. Our story is simple. Childhood sweethearts, who didn't find anyone suitable by the time we grew up, nudged together by our families. I was unsettled by this dullness. As a student, I saw firsthand how Jack loved someone. Young Jack was much livelier than now. Whenever I saw him, he'd be smiling. Whether he got scolded or won a basketball game, it was always the same joyful smile. He'd beam when he saw the girl he loved, his eyes crinkling like crescent moons, warming everyone like winter sunshine. Back then, he'd brave the cold and heat to deliver homemade breakfast to her. He'd light up the sky with lanterns, fill the playground with flowers, and confess his love loudly in front of everyone. So passionate and devoted. That girl was a top student, always winning physics competitions, eventually skipping grades, and going abroad to pursue her physics dreams. After she left, Jack seemed indifferent to everything. Before our wedding, I asked Jack, "Will we really be happy?" He said, "We will." Blinded by love, I ignored the indifference in his voice. I comforted myself, thinking people grow and become mature. The way he loves might change too. Then Jane, a young and beautiful game designer, came into his life. It turned out Jack only had one way to love. He started smiling while replying to messages, paying attention to lipstick shades he'd never noticed before, learning about women's perfumes, staying up late to test new games with her. When I anxiously found him at his company after he stayed out all night, he was having breakfast with her, carefully peeling eggs for her, something he'd never done for me. At that moment, I thought, it's okay if Jack doesn't love me. At least someone in the family does. Leo. Little did I know back then, Leo didn't love me as much as I thought. This child would later break my heart, piece by piece. That day ended badly. Knowing Jack and Leo's tempers, I thought they wouldn't come back. To my surprise, the next day, Leo was at my doorstep with a small backpack, alone this time. When the property management called, I was painting. I was drawing a picture of a little girl, in a princess dress running freely on a beautiful meadow. I have no photos or videos of Lisa. I'm afraid that with time, I might forget her face. So, I spend most of my time drawing her from memory, from a baby to the last moment she was 5. I've drawn so many, they fill every corner of my home. But then I thought, Lisa shouldn't just be on a hospital bed. So, I started traveling and taking photos of beautiful places, then painting her in those sceneries. This particular painting was slow going. I injured my right shoulder while horseback riding in the Middle East. It hurt to lift my arm. So this painting took over a month and still wasn't finished. It was my first time riding a horse. When I picked a white horse, the guide hesitated, saying it was temperamental and had thrown people off before. I smiled and said it's okay, because the horse was just so beautiful. Halfway through our journey, the horse acted up and suddenly knelt, throwing me onto the grass. Everyone was shocked. A little girl helped brush the grass off my face and sweetly asked, "Auntie, are you hurt?" I later helped her and her mom take many photos. She reminded me of Lisa, but actually, the farthest Lisa ever traveled was this seaside town. When her health was better, I planned a family vacation, but Jack said he was busy, and Leo wanted to participate in a game test at Jack's company. So it ended up just me and Lisa. Those brief days were so peaceful and lovely. We spent the days in our room painting and collecting shells on the beach in the mornings and evenings. She said that when she got better, she wanted to live there forever. So when I got divorced, I asked for the seaside house. It's a home for me and Lisa, not for Leo or Jack. I didn't want Leo setting foot there. I gave the property management Jack's and his parents' contacts without hesitation. Minutes later, they called again, saying Leo ran into the neighborhood unnoticed after trying to reach Jack. I couldn't just let anything happen to Leo, no matter how frustrated I was with him. Sighing, I put down my brush and went downstairs to look for him. I searched everywhere, sweating. Finally, I saw him waiting by my door, looking smug like he knew I wouldn't abandon him. I didn't say anything. I opened the door and let him slip inside like a proud little lion, strutting around as if he owned the place. He asked me, "Which room is mine? You bought a game console for me, right? I want to go play in my room." I didn't answer and told him to wait in the living room until Jack came to pick him up. Then I went back to my easel to finish my painting. I had barely started when I heard a loud crash from the kids' room. I walked over quickly and saw the painting that was hanging on the wall above the bed had fallen on the floor. The frame was shattered. The fragrance oil that got knocked over had soaked Lisa's face, making it unrecognizable. Leo was standing on the bed, looking bewildered. I don't like this painting. Why did you hang someone else's picture in my room? Why are you hugging her in the painting? I knew he probably just tried to take the painting down and didn't mean to break it. I also knew he was still a kid and didn't deserve my frustration, but my tone came out harsh. "Didn't I tell you to wait for your dad in the living room? Stop messing with things." He sensed my restrained emotions and looked vulnerable. "In the past, when I broke something, you'd always ask if I got hurt first." I didn't respond and my eyes landed on the bed sheets he had stepped on, now dirty. I couldn't help but frown. "Get down from there." He didn't move, still staring at me. "Mom, who is the girl you drew? Why did you draw her so many times? Why are all the paintings in the house of her?" He's too young to hide the fear and confusion in his eyes. He saw the house full of paintings, the girl in them with features similar to his. "Mom, why do the security guard and the neighbors say you don't have a son, only a daughter?" I told them I'm your son, but they called me a liar. I showed them our photos and they still didn't believe me. "This is my room, right?" He jumped off the bed and, as if trying to prove something, pulled open the wardrobe. He froze when he saw it full of princess dresses. "Why did you buy so many dresses? Where are my clothes? Why don't I have any clothes in here?" He rummaged through the wardrobe, finding nothing. He looked at me, eyes wide, seeking an answer to soothe him. I watched as his eyes filled with tears, standing silently. His tears fell one by one as I stayed quiet. Suddenly, he started crying and frantically pulling all the dresses out of the wardrobe, throwing them on the bed, sweeping the stuffed animals off the window seat, trying to assert his presence. "Why did you put someone else's dresses in my wardrobe? I don't like these stuffed animals. Why did you put so many in my room? I don't like this bed and bedding, it's a girl's bed. I don't like pink. Why did you make my room this color? Why are you hugging another girl in the paintings and hanging them in my room? I don't like her. I hate her. Hate her." This time, I couldn't hold back. "Leo, get out. This isn't your room. There's no room for you here." When Jack came to pick him up, Leo, in a panic, told him, "Dad, Mom's gone crazy. She's telling everyone she only has a daughter." Jack and Leo came back a month later, both cautious. Jack said, "Sonny, you're sick." He wanted me to talk to friends and family, so they could tell me the daughter I painted, the one I told everyone I loved, didn't exist, and was just a figment of my imagination. They brought out family photo albums and forced me to reminisce, but our past was too thin, like this album waiting to be filled. It was hard to find pictures of the three of us. Most were of Leo growing up, with a few of just me and him. As he grew older, maybe naturally, he gravitated more towards the authoritative presence in the house, the one who provided better conditions. He understood Jack's cold distance towards me and didn't want to take pictures with me anymore. Now, they held this barely filled album, recounting the past, trying to convince me I never had a daughter. I scoffed. Are you saying I'm crazy? Jack shook his head. No, Sonny, you're just sick. He pulled out a medical form, holding my hand, his voice almost choked with emotion. Sonny, why didn't you tell me? We were supposed to have another child. I looked at him silently. His face showed guilt and regret. About Jane, I can explain. It's not what you think. He said he only admired Jane's talent, paying more attention to her as a way to manage his subordinates. His tone was softer than I'd ever heard. Sonny, I know you misunderstood my relationship with Jane. That's why you impulsively terminated the pregnancy and divorced me. Afterwards, you regretted it. And that's why you imagined having a daughter. Sonny, it's my fault. I didn't maintain boundaries with a subordinate, causing your misunderstanding and sorrow, and making you this sick. We'd been married for 12 years in a past life, and I'd never seen Jack speak to me this humbly. I stared at him curiously, as if meeting him for the first time. In the past, whenever I noticed something suspicious between him and Jane, his response was always cold. Sonny, are you crazy? Even just half a year ago, he called to ask why without answering my question. Now, thinking I'm truly sick, he finally opened up and painstakingly explained his relationship with Jane. He said, Sonny, you're sick. You need treatment. Let me and Leo stay with you. Take care of you, okay? I told him to leave with Leo. When they came the second time, they brought a psychologist. I had just returned from Mexico a few days earlier. The doctor glanced at my neck, speaking as if we were old friends. What happened to your neck? I raised my hand to touch a thin purple scar on my neck, and casually replied, just a little accident while parasailing in Cancun a few days ago. That was the last stop of my Mexico trip. While parasailing above the sea, the rope connecting me to the speedboat suddenly snapped. Caught off guard, I plummeted from dozens of meters above into the sea. Despite wearing a life jacket, the parachute cord wrapped around my neck and tangled me with the seat. I couldn't surface. Struggling and getting weaker from lack of oxygen, I nearly drowned in that sea. Luckily, the speedboat driver dove in and saved me just in time. It's still scary to think about it. Dr. Lin didn't press further. He glanced at the unfinished painting on the easel. Lisa was smiling at the blue sky and white clouds while sitting on the parasail. He politely asked if he could look at my other paintings. After I agreed, he carefully viewed them all and then, holding one, asked, Can you tell me the inspiration behind this painting? It was a bird's eye view of the water, with Lisa floating on her back, smiling with arms open, as if welcoming and embracing something. I painted it after bungee jumping at the Gandaki River in Nepal. There were quite a few tourists that day, all either nervous or excitedly seeking encouragement from their friends or staff. But I was calm. The staff joked in English, saying I looked like I was there to commit suicide rather than have fun. He said he was scared to push me off. He said that, but he showed no mercy when he actually pushed me. The rushing wind pressed against my cheeks, my eyeballs. That sudden feeling of weightlessness briefly took me back to a past life, where I jumped from the 37th floor. In that moment, my memories and senses were fuzzy. It ended in a blink. But this time, the feeling of free fall was so clear. As I approached the water, I had a hallucination. I saw Lisa's figure flickering in the water, smiling and reaching out to hug me. But as I tried to hold her, she shattered into the sparkling waves of the Gandaki River. I didn't answer Dr. Lin's question. Dr. Lin was patient, gently guiding me, trying to analyze the logic behind my actions. Sonny, when you terminated your pregnancy, it was just an embryo without any gender characteristics. Why do you think it was a girl? Could it be possible that you're projecting yourself onto it? I laughed. Are you calling me narcissistic? No. Dr. Lin shook his head. You feel pity for yourself. Could it be that you directed your resentment for your husband onto the child? After aborting the child, you regretted it and so imagined a girl based on yourself. Similarly, you don't stop loving Leo. You love him too much, but redirect your anger. You then pour all your love into this imagined girl, who, however, is very dangerous for you. He sighed lightly. Wild rides, parasailing, bungee jumping. Sonny, have you noticed you're always seeking high-risk activities? This imagined girl is guiding you towards death. If you don't open up and accept treatment, the consequences could be dire. Sonny, I want to help you. Jack chimed in. Sonny, accept treatment. Let us help you. Take care of you, all right. Leo stepped forward, trying to hold my hand, more gentle than ever. I told you, Mom, you couldn't just stop loving me. It's because you're sick. Let us help you. Mom, can you draw a picture for me? You've never drawn one for me. I interrupted him. I have drawn one for you. For your birthday last year, I gave you a portrait as a gift. My grades were always just above average, not like the top students Jack liked. But I was talented in art, and got into the best art school in the country. Unfortunately, My parents always thought I wouldn't make much money from painting alone and hoped I'd marry soon after graduating, so they wouldn't have to worry and could move to New Zealand with my brother. I compromised, because the person they set me up with was Jack. At that time, I thought I could still paint after getting married, but soon I got pregnant with Leo, and household chores and raising him took up most of my time. Whenever I wanted to settle down and paint, Leo would start crying, and I'd have to set my brush down to comfort him, gradually neglecting my art. Until Leo's 5th birthday, when I suddenly decided to pick up my long unused brushes and paint a portrait for him. But he clearly preferred the gaming console Jane gave him, tossing the painting aside carelessly. Later, I found the painting under his small desk, folded into a tiny square as a makeshift table leg support. Leo stammered, I didn't do it on purpose. I must have taken the wrong thing. I smiled and exposed him. No, you did it on purpose. That day, you refused to take a bath, and I confiscated your game console. So you did this to get back at me. Whenever I didn't agree with you, you'd destroy my gifts, ruin my good intentions, just to hurt me. Because you knew I loved and cared for you, and seeing your actions would make me sad. You wanted to make me sad. Leo turned pale, mumbling for words, but failing to speak. I looked up at Jack, knowing he had subtly sought reconciliation. For instance, in the past life, Leo's school never organized a parent-child trip. Also, with so many bodyguards and maids, how could they have let Leo out of sight without panic? And he hadn't worn clothes I bought him for a long time. At some point, he started choosing his own clothes, and later I found out Jane bought them. To please Jane, he avoided touching anything I bought, changing even his perfume to Jane's favorite leather scent. Yet, when he came to see me recently, he wore the clothes I bought and the woodsy perfume I liked. I just didn't care. I don't care why he suddenly wants to make up with me after a year. I don't even care why, after I made room for him, he didn't just bring Jane in. Because I don't care. I won't spell it out. He's always been proud in front of me. Even if he wants to reconcile, he can't swallow his pride. He only thinks about using Leo to make me soft and come back to him. Now, he thinks I'm sick and suddenly finds it easy to bow down. His attitude changes 180 degrees. In an instant, he learns to be gentle, learns to accommodate. As if because I'm a patient, I suddenly become this fragile thing he needs to protect. All his actions now have a great selfless reason, for my good. He acts so sincere that I almost believe him. Jack, you say you and Jane are just friends. Then why did you find the best jade, carve a Buddha statue by hand, and walk up the 81 steps of Nanshan Temple to get it blessed by a monk? Because she gets sick often. Even when Lisa was very sick in her past life, you, as a father, never did that for her. Why do you use work as an excuse to spend Valentine's Day with her? Why do you hug her, kiss her? Jack's face darkens. I smile. Are you wondering how I know all this? Your son told me. The first time I heard about Jane was from Leo. One day out of nowhere, he started frequently telling me how good Jane was, what Jane did with Dad and Mom. Why can't you be as good as Jane? At the beginning, it might have been unintentional, but later, it was obviously on purpose. I said before, he's precocious. Once he noticed I felt sad whenever Jane was mentioned, he'd bring her up whenever he wasn't satisfied with me. I know he likes Jane and those games, but he may not actually want her as a mother. He just enjoys punishing me by revealing his father's closeness with another woman. Especially after I had Lisa in my past life, his behavior only got worse. During my pregnancy, he would casually say, Mom, you're fat and ugly, not like Jane, who's so slim and pretty. While I was breastfeeding, he would say casually, Mom's belly is flabby with many stretch marks, clothes are messy, full of milk stains, you stink of milk. No wonder Dad sleeps in another room. When I stayed in the hospital with Lisa for her surgeries, he'd occasionally tell me how Jack gave Jane this or spent time doing that with her today or yesterday. Ecstatically, he'd tell me, Jane is amazing. She designed a new game. I get to play a new game because of her, not like you, so useless. He'd come back from trips with Jack and tell me where they went and what they did with Jane, and how others thought they were a family of 3. He'd show off photos of the 3 of them and ask if the pictures were taken well. He thought he hid it well, but every time he spoke, I could see the malice in his eyes clearly. For the first time, I experienced the innocent cruelty of a child from my own son. He was like a little devil. Daily chanting spells meant to drive me crazy. I knew boring relatives and friends gossiped to him, saying that after having a second child, I'd only love Lisa, not him. I also introspected, wondering if I'd really been biased between him and Lisa, making him act this way. But I thought long and hard and was sure I hadn't. Even though I constantly ran between the hospital and home for Lisa, I always checked on Leo, making sure he ate well and did his homework. Unless Lisa had surgery, even if I hadn't slept for 2 days, I'd force myself to attend his parent-teacher meetings. Before Lisa was born, he didn't even like my company. He found me annoying and preferred being alone, playing games. When I stopped focusing on him and spent time on his sister instead, he got upset. He didn't want my attention, but also didn't want anyone else to have it. I didn't understand where this selfish trait in his personality came from. When I reincarnated and left Jack without hesitation, and he shamelessly tried to reconcile, I figured it out. He's just like his father. The man who, when I was exhausted from Lisa's illness and heartbroken from Leo's deliberate stings, was busy cheating and planning our divorce. How I wished we could divorce. I'm not a masochist, nor am I so in love with Jack that I can't live without him. But for Lisa's sake, I couldn't. Lisa's treatment costs were beyond what an average income could cover. Even if I wanted a divorce and left Lisa with Jack, I knew he'd rather spend time with Jane than stay by Lisa's hospital bed, and I wouldn't be at ease. Lisa's heart couldn't handle the shock of family upheaval, so I bit the bullet and held on. I kept wondering why Jack could love Leo, but not Lisa. Lisa was so pretty, so well behaved. Facing pain and countless surgeries, she always held back her tears until she couldn't anymore. Even when she was frightened in the hospital with only caregivers around, she always urged me to rest more. She missed her father and brother, confused why they rarely visited, but she never asked, never complained. At such a young age, she was heartbreakingly sensible. After Lisa died, I found a long-prepared divorce agreement in his study and understood. Her existence stopped him from proposing divorce. A man who asked for divorce while his daughter was on the brink of death would face a public uproar with Jane. He couldn't risk that. Unable to shake me off, he resented Lisa for it. He showed no concern for Lisa, and Leo saw this and followed suit. Even though Lisa really liked her brother, he was unwilling to stay in the hospital a bit longer to keep his poor sister company. Whenever I forced him to come, he would just sit there playing games, ignoring Lisa when she tried to talk to him. If I was away, he would even go out of his way to irritate Lisa, almost as if to spite me. Lisa passed away on her 5th birthday. I had called Jack, asking him to come home so our family could properly celebrate Lisa's birthday. I had prepared a painting as a birthday gift for Lisa, a recreated version of the one Leo had destroyed that hung in the children's room. I held her by the window with the blue sea and windmills outside. The golden sunlight fell on her face, masking her sickly pallor. Lisa loved it, keeping it close and looking at it often. But when it was time to light the birthday candles, Jack still hadn't come back. I could see the disappointment in Lisa's eyes. I went to the kitchen to call Jack, but he didn't answer no matter how many times I tried. When I returned to the living room, I was thinking about how to explain Jack's absence to Lisa. Then, I heard Leo, who was 11, sneer at the painting with sheer malice. "It's so ugly. Your face is as pale as a ghost. At my school, girls as ugly as you are hated. No wonder Dad doesn't want to spend your birthday with you." Lisa's face went pale instantly. I couldn't believe my ears. Had Leo always spoken so cruelly to Lisa when I wasn't around? I had never laid a hand on Leo before, but this time, I couldn't help but slap him. He held his cheek, looked at me in shock, and angrily shouted, "Dad is out on a date with Jane. He's not coming back to celebrate with this sick kid. You can call as many times as you want, it won't matter. From now on, I won't celebrate her birthday either. Dad is going to divorce you and marry Jane, and I'll live with them. We don't want this sick kid or you either." Lisa collapsed, clutching her chest. That day, I carried her limp body to the ambulance, desperately praying for another miracle. But after the doctors tried to save her, they told me that Lisa's condition couldn't handle another surgery. They advised me to let go. I looked at Lisa, writhing in pain on the hospital bed, my mind racing, utterly lost. I kept calling Jack, but he never answered. Later, I found out he was with Jane. In the end, I signed the consent form to stop treatment, watching as the doctors removed Lisa's oxygen and stopped all the machines. Jack was the last to arrive at the hospital. By that time, even Jack's parents and the funeral home staff had gotten there. He demanded to know why I didn't wait for him, why I decided to stop the treatment without his consent. I thought, wait for what? Wait for him to crawl out of his lover's bed and put on a show of being a caring father so people wouldn't say he missed his daughter's last moments. Should I have let Lisa suffer for a few more hours for his reputation? I looked at him, then at Leo standing far off by the door, their expressions equally indifferent. One was busy cheating while his daughter was dying, not even spending her last birthday with her. The other cruelly drove his own sister to her death. How could they be so calm? How could they not shed a single tear? I suddenly found them terrifying. I knew all this was from a past life, that it hadn't happened in this one and wouldn't happen again. Maybe I shouldn't judge 6-year-old Leo for crimes he hadn't committed yet, but I couldn't help it. I gently let go of Leo's hand and smiled at the doctor. Doctor, you're wrong. To me, it's not the girl in the painting who poses a danger. It's Jack and Leo. If one day I go insane, if I die, it will be because they pushed me there. The third time Jack and Leo came, their attitude had turned aggressive. I was about to leave for Iceland. With my suitcase in hand and about to take the elevator, Jack blocked me. He threatened, "Sonny, if you still refuse to see a psychiatrist, I'll have to commit you to a mental hospital." I looked at him, amused. On what grounds? We're divorced. You're not my guardian. We have no relation, ex-husband. Leo chimed in, but I'm your son. I can do it. I glanced down at him. Too bad you're underage. They were powerless against me. I turned to leave, but Jack reached out again, accidentally breaking the necklace around my neck. The pendant fell, the picture of Lisa inside it exposed. Jack froze, staring at the little image, finally unable to contain his temper. If you decided to abort the baby, you shouldn't regret it. With trembling hands, I gripped the pendant tightly, refusing to show any weakness, and slapped him. He understood nothing. He knew nothing. After being reborn, I hesitated and struggled. But toward the end of my previous life, Lisa lay in pain on the hospital bed, crying and saying to me, "Mom, I feel terrible. It hurts so much. If there's a next life, can I not come to the human world?" I really had no other options. I put the broken necklace into my pocket, didn't look at Jack and Leo again, pulled my suitcase, and entered the elevator. Winter in Iceland has an extreme desolate feeling. The turbulent waves crash against the black sand beach. The dark lava-formed stones starkly contrast with the white sea foam. Waterfalls, volcanoes, glacier, fjords. This small island boasts many unique terrains and wondrous landscapes. Due to its proximity to the Arctic Circle, the daylight hours here in winter are very short. The sun remains near the horizon, with the dawn almost seamlessly blending into dusk, and the pinkish-purple Venus belt in the sky can last a long time. When I came, I brought a bunch of expensive photography equipment. Upon landing at Keflavik Airport, I rented a car and planned to drive around the island to chase the aurora. However, either the KP index for the aurora was below 1 on clear days, or the weather was bad, with thick clouds, so I never got to capture it. On the last day of the trip, the weather forecast predicted a blizzard the next evening. Roads might be closed for several days afterwards, so I had to abandon the rest of my journey. Though I hadn't captured the aurora, I was unwilling to give up. Even though the KP index was still only 1 that day, I saw the weather was fairly clear and decided to drive out that night to try my luck. I found an open wilderness spot and waited in the car until 3 a.m., but still saw nothing. Finally disheartened, I decided to give up. But sometimes, fate loves to play tricks. Just as I started the car to leave, the aurora appeared. Green ribbons of light danced in the sky, flickering unpredictably, mesmerizing and mysterious. I quickly took my photography gear and set it up in a spot with the best view, capturing this gift from nature. In temperatures below freezing, I could barely stand outside watching the aurora for a while before getting too cold and deciding to take a nap in the car, letting the equipment shoot automatically. The necklace that Jack broke hung on the car's rearview mirror, with the pendant of Lisa smiling at me. I looked at her face and smiled too. "Lisa, look, Mom brought you to see the aurora." I lay in the car, watching the aurora dancing outside the window, falling asleep only after a long time, which led to waking up a bit late with the sky already bright. Strong winds were blowing outside, and the place where I set up my photography gear was a bit far from the road where I parked, with the swirling snow reducing visibility to the point where I couldn't see my setup from the car. Calculating the drive back to Akureyri and considering the evening blizzard, I decided to get out and retrieve my equipment despite the wind and snow. At that time, I didn't know that Iceland's weather forecasts for blizzards are not always accurate, and changes can occur earlier or later than predicted. When I reached the spot where I set up my equipment, I found both tripods had been blown over, and one camera was nowhere to be seen, blown away by the wind. I groped around in the snow that was several times thicker than last night, finally finding the damaged camera. Afraid that the melting snow would ruin the SD cards, I quickly put the SD cards from both cameras into my pocket. As I walked back, the view was just a vast white expanse with visibility under 5 meters. The rental car keys didn't include a find car button, so I could only carry the heavy cameras and tripods. Trying to head towards the car based on my feeling, I walked for a long time, much further than the distance from the setup spot to the car, realizing I had lost my way in the unexpectedly early blizzard. I tried to find bearings, exhausted myself, eventually had to drop the heavy cameras and tripods, but still couldn't find the car. I took out my phone to call for rescue, but there was no signal. I could only blindly search, alone in the roaring snowstorm. The relentless storm grew fiercer. Bone-chilling winds laden with snow particles made it hard to keep my eyes open. I walked slower and slower, feeling my body gradually lose warmth, my limbs frozen and numb. I knew I couldn't stop, moving forward purely on instinct. In the end, I collapsed in the snow. I thought, I'm going to die in this foreign land's blizzard. But I wasn't afraid. I even felt somewhat relieved. I said in my heart, I'm sorry, Lisa. Mom didn't want to break her promise, but Mom really can't hold on anymore. In fact, the doctor was right. I indeed was sick. I had been testing death all along. After Lisa died in my previous life, I suffered from severe depression. Or maybe, I had already been ill long before I found out about Jack's affair. Long before Leo kept provoking me. Long before I accompanied Lisa through endless surgeries and hospital stays. Every day felt grey. Everything around me was filled with malice. My husband and my son were so indifferent, and my daughter was so pitiful. I struggled desperately, exhausted every day, yet saw no way forward, no light ahead. For Lisa, I gritted my teeth and held on, pretending everything was fine before her, not letting her see the fractures in the family, or her father and brother's ugliness. Until Lisa died, all suppressed negative emotions erupted, devouring me like an abyss. I kept telling myself not to die. I promised Lisa that even if she was gone, I would live well, but I couldn't control the urge to self-harm. At first, Jack and Leo did feel guilty. They armored themselves with calmness, but were not truly unmoved by Lisa's death. People can be so contradictory, trying to escape their sins while unable to stop feeling guilt and wanting to make amends. They pretended to be a happy family before me. Jack stopped seeing Jane. Leo stopped saying hurtful things, acting like we were a blissful trio. But none of that mattered to me. I always remembered their indifferent gazes at Lisa's deathbed. No matter how much they smiled at me, no matter how kindly they treated me, they remained cold-blooded, frightening, and disgusting to me, the most loathsome monsters haunting my world. They started losing their patience as they got closer to me, and my condition got worse. I'd burst into tears in the middle of the night, fly off the handle out of nowhere, and harm myself. They soon considered me a burden, feeling embarrassed by me. They reverted to their old ways. Jack started not coming home again. Leo became cold and distant. The day I climbed to the rooftop of the 37th floor, Leo yelled at me with disgust. Lisa's death is entirely your fault. We don't have any hereditary diseases. If you had given her a healthy body, she wouldn't have gotten sick and died. I stood at the edge of the rooftop, stunned. Really? Was it really my fault? Maybe during my pregnancy, I missed something, which led to Lisa's heart condition and suffering in this world. The thin string that had held me back from death snapped at that moment. I jumped from the 37th floor. Depression doesn't cure itself with rebirth. Even in a new life, those negative feelings stick around. The day I had the abortion, I wished I'd bleed out on that operating table and go with Lisa. But I kept dreaming of her, crying and begging me not to die. I didn't want to disappoint her. That day, I got home and saw Jack and Leo living as recklessly as ever. They didn't understand anything. They knew nothing. Only I remembered everything from my previous life. Only I carried the pain, remembering their sins and disgusting faces. So, I fled from those two monsters, Jack and Leo. But it wasn't enough. The negative emotions and guilt were still there. I didn't want to break my promise to Lisa, so I held onto her memory to fight depression. I decorated a room for her, pretending she was still with me. I drew so many portraits of her, almost going insane. I traveled everywhere, seeing the world for her. I tried to pretend everything was changing for the better. I tried to pretend I was escaping the negativity, but I couldn't stop testing death. Every time I did something risky, I lied to myself, saying it was for Lisa, but it was really for me. Now, the death I've longed for has finally come. Amid the blinding snowstorm, I felt a strange peace. I slowly closed my eyes. Suddenly, the continuous car horn broke through the blizzard, ringing in my ears without stopping, annoying me. I battled that dark, negative part of myself amidst the horn's blare. I really wanted to give up. I really wanted to give up, but I thought of Lisa. In the end, I opened my eyes, struggled to get up from the snow, found the tripod I'd thrown away, and realized I'd been walking in circles. Using the tripod as a cane, I crawled towards the car horns with my numb limbs. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. When I finally reached the car, I found it was only about 100 meters away. Shivering, I opened the car door. How should I describe the miraculous scene before me? No matter how many times I look back, I always feel Lisa's soul saved me from that deadly snowstorm, guiding me to find a way out. because it shouldn't have happened. The heavy tripod on the passenger seat had fallen onto the driver's seat, apparently due to the shaking car in the storm, and the necklace hanging on the rearview mirror had somehow fallen, wrapping around the tripod, pressing down on the horn. The pendant of Lisa was smiling at me through the continuous honking. In that moment, tears streamed down my face. Returning to the car, my phone regained signal. I called for emergency help, and half an hour later, Icelandic rescue workers found me and took me to a local hospital. Luckily, my frostbite wasn't severe, and after a few days, I returned home. After surviving that blizzard, my depression suddenly lifted. I always knew this seaside town was beautiful, but living here for a year, I was numb, feeling nothing. Though I traveled, no scenery really touched me. But after returning from Iceland, everything felt different. The wind turbines turned lazily in the distance. The blue sea gently washed the golden sand, and the glow on rusted ships was beautiful enough to make me pause. The world wasn't grey anymore. It was filled with colors. I still live here, still paint, and still travel, but I no longer seek danger. I started using social media, posting Lisa's portraits and my travel photos, gaining quite a following. I suddenly became a rising star artist and photographer. A year later, someone contacted me to host an exhibition, and I agreed. The theme was An Angel Once Lived. All of the portraits were of Lisa. On the opening day, many people came, even Jack and Leo. Though I didn't care much, they'd been harassing me. When they couldn't force me into therapy, Jack changed tactics. He'd never given me flowers or surprises during our marriage, but now he thought they'd win me back. I sneered at that. As for Leo, he was always jealous whenever I added something for Lisa at home. Before, when I loved him, he preferred games, but now, no matter how many Jane gave him, he only told her to get lost. Jack even fired her. Now, more than games, he wanted my motherly love. He cried and said, "Mom, I'm your real son. Why won't you look at me and give all your love to your imaginary daughter?" A week ago, they suddenly stopped bothering me. I thought they'd finally gotten tired, but now they were at my exhibit. Seeing my guarded look, Jack gave a bitter smile. "You don't need to worry. We're not here to cause trouble." He stared at the nearest painting, Lisa smiling like an angel in the blizzard. Jack's eyes suddenly watered. "Sonny, I've been having the same dream every night, dreaming we have a daughter named Lisa." Leo looked up with red, tear-filled eyes. "Mom, I dreamed it too. Is it true?" I coldly watched them and said nothing. That day, Jack and Leo, with tear-filled eyes, carefully viewed every painting. The last painting took up an entire wall. Lisa, under Icelandic northern lights, sprouting white wings and flying to the sky. She was my angel who once lived. Jack and Leo stood for a long time before the painting, and after that day, they never appeared in my life again. Epilogue. When Leo was 11, Sonny got remarried and soon had a daughter named Mary. On the day Mary was born, Leo climbed up to the rooftop of the 37th floor, demanding to see Sonny. Jack, slightly annoyed, told him, "Leo, stop messing around." In that moment, both father and son froze. They both remembered the dream, remembered the past life, where Sonny stood precariously in the wind on the 37th floor, and they said the same thing to her. "Stop messing around." The blood splatter from Sonny's fall and the pale look when Lisa died lingered in Jack's nightmares for years. Sonny's assessment of him was spot on. He was indeed a jerk. He always thought Sonny was too boring, too quiet, and too invisible. She repeated the same routines at home every day, wore similar clothes, blending into the background. It wasn't until after their divorce, when Sonny left without looking back, that he realized his feelings for her. She had seeped into every corner of his life, like a gentle rain. When she left suddenly, it felt like a huge void appeared in his heart, impossible to fill. He would call her name instinctively when he couldn't find something. He would turn around, thinking she was right behind him. One night, after misjudging and finding an empty space beside him, the longing for her surged, overwhelming his sanity like a fierce virus. He had to get her back. But back then, he didn't understand anything. He didn't know Leo had told Sonny everything, nor did he know what he had done in a past life. He couldn't understand why Sonny's eyes were so cold and mocking, as if he was something filthy, until he had that dream. In the dream, after Sonny died, he came to his senses, realizing his feelings for her. Guilt, heartbreak, and longing tormented him to the brink of madness. He knew he had to do something. He had to do something. So, he sought revenge on Jane. He kicked her out of the company, driving her to debt, and eventually she had to sell her body. In the end, she caught a disease and came at him with a knife. When she stabbed his heart, she screamed, "Did I force you to cheat? Did I force you to sleep with me? It's you. It's you who couldn't control yourself. Why blame me for everything?" Yeah, he was such a disgusting person, always shifting blame, avoiding the truth. Like how he knew Lisa would have a congenital heart problem, possibly because Sonny had found out about his affair during pregnancy, causing stress. But he didn't want to admit it. So he ignored Sonny and Lisa's pain, numbing himself with the affair. Even on the day Lisa died, he still didn't want to admit he was wrong. He blamed Jane for seducing him, for silencing his phone, making him miss Sonny's call and Lisa's last birthday. He blamed Sonny for signing the DNR form, ending Lisa's life early, preventing him from seeing her one last time. It was always their fault. He was never wrong. He always twisted the truth to suit himself. Sonny was right. He was a terrifying monster, hideous and unrepentant. He deserved to lose Sonny's love. He wasn't worthy of it. He dared not see her again. He didn't truly want to give up on Sonny. He actually wanted to keep trying. But he feared her cold gaze, which laid bare all his darkness and filth. So, for years, he kept himself and Leo from disturbing her. In truth, he also blamed Leo for triggering Lisa's death and eventually driving Sonny to her death, even though he didn't guide Leo properly or curb his bad behavior. But he convinced himself it was all Leo's fault, not his. In the past life, after Sonny's death, Leo suffered severe depression. Sonny's words rang true. Leo's destructive tendencies were a mirror of his own. Just like he only realized his remorse after Sonny's death, Leo only realized how much he loved his mother after losing her. Leo started crying for no reason like Sonny used to, throwing tantrums over trivial matters, and self-harming if not watched. Jack watched coldly, not intervening. In the past life, Jack didn't know what happened to Leo after his death, but in this life, after sharing the same dream about the past, Leo fell into the same severe depression. He would cry and ask Jack, "Dad, my heart hurts. Do I have a heart problem like my sister? If I have a heart problem, will Mom and Sis forgive me?" Each hospital visit returned with a clean bill of health. As he grew older and understood psychological issues, he stopped asking Jack. But he still yearned to see Sonny, resorting to stalking through the internet under Jack's watchful eyes. When he found out Sonny had a new boyfriend, he taunted Jack like he used to taunt Sonny. He deliberately told Jack about Sonny's outings, the gifts she received, their kisses, and her acceptance of the man's proposal. Sonny's getting married. He repeatedly told Jack about how happy Sonny was after leaving them. He punished himself and tormented Jack. Jack, in his endless agony, finally understood how Sonny felt when dealing with Leo, and why she resolutely rejected her son. He's just like him, a hideous demon. The day Sonny announced she was getting married, Jack nearly lost it. He wanted to rush to her and ask, "How can you get married? How can you fall in love with someone else? Have you forgotten about Lisa?" But he held himself back, and even though he wasn't invited, he sent a decent gift. When he found out she was pregnant and had a daughter, Jack was sad, but not as crazed as before. It was Leo who freaked out. But that day on the 37th floor rooftop, when they both froze after he yelled, "Stop this nonsense," Leo came down from the roof by himself, and never brought up wanting to see Sonny again. They scrolled through Sonny's Facebook together. A fan asked her, "You've drawn so many Lisas. Why didn't you name your daughter Lisa but Mary?" She replied, "Lisa is Lisa, Mary is Mary." Others might not get it, but Jack and Leo did. Mary wasn't a replacement for Lisa, not there to fill some void left by Lisa. Sonny was a good mother. She never played favorites with her kids. Later, Jack donated half his assets to charity, setting up a charitable fund for children with cardiovascular disease. As Leo got older, he often recalled the dream about his past life, where he was a jerk. Honestly, though he liked games and Jane, who could design games, he never really wanted Jane to be his mom. At the start, he was just rebelling against Sonny's rules. Later, he hated how Sonny's attention was mostly taken by Lisa. He feared, just like people said, that she would stop loving him now that he had a sister. Even at 11 years old in the past life, he probably knew those intentional jabs at Sonny and Lisa were wrong. He never wanted them dead, but once hurtful words become a habit, they just slip out. So he turned quiet. After getting into college, he didn't choose finance. He chose to study medicine, focusing on pediatric cardiology. During breaks, he volunteered at children's hospitals. Both he and Jack were trying to atone in their own ways. Many years later, Leo finally became a skilled pediatric heart surgeon. He practically lived at the hospital. If he wasn't seeing patients, he was performing surgeries. He pushed himself to the limit, as if curing more kids could cleanse his sins. Then he met a 5-year-old girl. She was pretty, sweet, with the same congenital heart disease as Lisa. Leo was her surgeon. Her surgery day was her birthday. The operation lasted 20 hours and was successful. Exhausted but smiling, Leo stepped out of the OR, and then he collapsed. Cardiac arrest, and he passed away with a smile.